Hi, I'm Ofer, Head of Developer Relations at Vectara, and welcome to Build with AI Hackathon. So I'm going to start with RAG. Most of you have probably heard this term, but if you haven't, it stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what we mean by that is the following. If you have a user query with a regular LLM call, the LLM just responds right away based on its internal knowledge. With RAG, the user query goes to a data store that contains your own data and retrieves the most relevant facts to help answer this question. Then the LLM gets the task of answering the user query given or grounded in these facts. So essentially it's LLM grounded in your own data. Now, in terms of how this works, the flow has two main steps. One is called the data ingest, which is in the blue arrow, and data coming from any of your data sources that you want. And sometimes text needs to be extracted from, let's say, a PDF file or another binary format. There's something called chunking that gets done to split the text into smaller chunks. And then if you have tables or images in the data, you might want to do some more complicated table processing, etc. And then the text is encoded in something called an embedding model stored in a vector database. And the green arrow highlights the user query flow, where a user query comes in. And again, the query is embedded as well, compared against the vector database. And the most relevant chunks are retrieved that are the most relevant to answer this question. Sometimes you have other pieces like hybrid search or ranking. All of this is essentially a kind of retrieval flow that results in the most relevant chunks of text coming in on the other side. Then there's, of course, a prompt that includes those facts and some instructions to the LM, essentially to generate a response based on those facts. And then a hallucination detection if you want to handle hallucinations better, and then you send a response back. So this is generally the flow. And as you can see, one of the things that we do with Vectara is we wrap all of this in what we call RAG in a box, or RAG as a service. And what that means is we have an API that simplifies this. So all you have to do with Vectara is you have to index your documents and run the query through our API, and all the details of what's going on here is managed by us. Now, one other thing to note is if you build it yourself, of course, you have to pay for the embedding model, for the generative LLM, for the ranker, for the vector database, etc., 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 and build all those pieces and put them together, which is quite hard. In Vectara, you don't have to do all of that. We do all of that for you, and that's really nice. And also, this is a SaaS application to start off with. And that's what you're going to use here in the hackathon. But we also have a VPC and on-prem option. So I mentioned how much building a RAG platform is hard. Vectara is very nice for hackathons because you don't have to be an expert in all of these pieces. You just want to build the end application, right? And so having a RAG stack ready for you is actually really helpful in that way. Okay, so to take a step back, again, we provide the extraction, encoding, indexing, all those pieces you see here. And what's exposed to the user is just the uploading of the data, the indexing of the data, and the query through an API makes it really, really plug and play and easy to use. And so the other three things I want to highlight that make our platform really unique is that we focus on accuracy, security, and explainability. Three key components that companies really care about when they implement production quality RAG stacks, RAG applications. All right. So with that, let's get started about Vectara and how to work with it as developers. So first thing I'll say is how to get started is you sign up for your free trial here. Then I would recommend you look through the quick start guide in our documentation. The link is over here. You can create a corpus, invite a team member to your account if you have multiple members in your hackathon team. You can create API keys. We have a query API, a query and indexing API, and there's a personal API key which has access to everything. You can use the console to try ingesting some data with drag and drop and run some queries, but the console is really there for you to try out things and see how it works quickly. Your application ultimately usually comes back with the API as implemented. We have very detailed documentation. Here you see the API reference that shows you all the types of calls in the API you can make, the queries, the upload, etc. I can click on this to show you. This goes here. You can look at each one of these, and let's look at the indexing, for example. You can see there's also a little helper here, so you can fill in some information and actually execute an API request if you like to see what it looks like. So it's a quick Very helpful way to do it. There's also the documentation here, which has a lot of useful information. And then, let's see, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And then this is the console I mentioned. I'm just showing here the analytics tab, which actually shows you when did you last index or query requests. But you see you can have the access control tab here, where you can create API keys, general settings with metadata filters, etc., and just a tab for your data that you uploaded to look at, and you can try queries over here. Now, I want to also mention 2 open source projects. There's quite a few in our public repository you can look at, but 2 I wanted to mention here. One is called Vectara Ingest. It's a project that's fully open source, Apache, that you can use right away to help you quickly ingest data into Vectara. It's got crawlers for multiple sources of data, from S3 files in a folder to GitHub to a website and everything you want. And you could really crawl the data, ingest it directly into Vectara by just configuring it. It's also open source, so if you like, you can take a look at it and do whatever you want with it, maybe copy reference code or anything like that. And then Vectara Answer is a kind of a UI built for question answering. So it's the other side of the ingest, is the query flow. Very well built. And let me show you an example here. This is a demo we built with Vectara Answer. It's called Ask News. We have documents being crawled with Vectara Ingest every day with different types of news sources. And you can just click a question and get the answer here. As you can see also, we integrated here the HHEM, the hallucination detection model, which shows you whether this is a hallucination or not, and it shows you all the references, the explainability part. So it's pretty cool. You can customize it. You can change, of course, the footer, remove the header, change it to whatever you want. It also supports a bunch of languages and other things like this. So it's really cool. You should try it out. And then last but not least, I wanted to share a more recent open source project we released called Vectara Agentic. If you've heard about Agentic RAG, it's a really cool way to extend RAG beyond the simple vector data, vector DB retrieval. So with Agentic RAG, you can build AI assistants and agents. And essentially the way it works is there's an agent in charge, an LLM underneath. And when a user query comes in, it kind of analyzes the query, understands the intent, and plans how to answer this query in a step-by-step manner using things we call tools that you can provide it. So a tool could be calling Vectara RAG, the kind of the vanilla RAG, if you will. It could be multiple corpora or whatever, which is very, very common. But you can also add to that maybe a call to a real-time API, something behind a paywall, or even make a database call with some SQL or anything you want. Essentially, a tool is a very flexible mechanism. And what the agent does is it takes all of these tool outputs and crafts ultimately at the end a response to the user query. We have something called Vectara Agentic, and I encourage you to take a look at this. It's essentially a pip install Vectara Agentic, and there's a lot of examples and a repository here you can look at. And there's a couple of demos that we show you how to use it as well. Yeah, and one final thing, I like to have this slide on for hackathons. Part of doing a hackathon usually is finding data, so here's a couple of recommendations for you. These are usually search engines for data. There's data from many governments around the world, and this is just a partial list. There's things about healthcare, finance, legal, etc. So think about which data set you want to use to run your project. And that's it. Thank you for listening. I shared here some resources. Again, how to sign up to Vectara, our documentation. We have a Discord channel you can go to later on and join. We have a lot of sample code here and some demo applications here. And most, if not all of these, are completely open source, so you can take a look at them and use them. Again, my name is Ofer, and if you have further questions after the hackathon about Vectara, you can always book some time with me here. And during the hackathon, I'll be around virtually and try to help if you have any questions. Thank you very much for listening.